Ricky!
And Ricky's got an announcement to make. EastEnders is in
Oh, yeah.
half an hour. And that's here on BBC One, right after the music show with Bottle.
Alright, welcome back to a Top of the Pops reaction, and this...
Hello, we're Blur, we're number one, and we're going to be camping out...
Yes, what a historic episode this is. Blur and number one. That is a spoiler right from the get-go, because this was the Top of the Pops that followed the infamous 1995 chart battle between Blur and Oasis. Jarvis Cocker is your host. This is dated August 24th, 1995. So, wow, 25 years ago today. So, the Battle of Britpop. It was on the news. And I think we're going to see Blur and Oasis both on this episode. So, this was very, a very iconic and probably well viewed at the time episode of Top of the Pops. So, kicking off with Clock and Everybody. Eurodance, you could call it. I remember this. I do like a lot of Eurodance. I would say this was one of my very favourites in the genre. I love European sort of cheesy dance music and electro and stuff. So, anything like this I will enjoy to a certain extent, certainly. But like I say, I think there's been better hits in this genre than Everybody by Clock, but this is fine. Probably a little bit of an anomaly for this episode, I would have thought. I mean, this is, you think about what was happening in music and in, British culture at this time. This episode has Blur at number one, Oasis will be at number two, so we'll be seeing them shortly, no doubt. Jarvis Cocker from Pulp, another one of the big Britpop acts of the era, he's presenting. There's a lot of big names of this mid-90s sort of musical rebirth, musical boom on this one episode of Top of the Pops. You could say that probably this is the peak of Britpop, I would say. After this episode of Top of the Pops, there wasn't really ever an exciting chart battle for the singles chart position, number one position ever again. Yeah, I'm really excited to be able to do this. Hopefully I won't be making too many edits and cuts for this episode. And thank you for joining me. I hope you're going to enjoy it as much as I no doubt will.
Singing live for America. She's going to have to shout a bit. Right now, singing live from that stage over there. It's the hair, the lips, the big organ. It's got a bit of Charlotte.
Oh, wow, okay. Oh, excellent. Oh, I love this song. Wow, I mean, music-wise, even if, you're not a fan of Clock, and although I quite liked that, I wouldn't blame you, but, we're going to see Oasis, we're going to see Blur, with two of their biggest hits, and one of my favourite Charlatans songs. So, the Charlatans featuring on Top of the Pops, on the same episode as Oasis, Blur, Jarvis Cocker, and who knows who else. I really like this, just when you're thinking things over. I think this was off, and I think it was off their self-titled album. It was the Charlatans album called The Charlatans. There is Tim Burgess there on lead vocals. But, yeah, great song this. I mean, another really memorable Britpop era single for me, this. Love it. I love the organ-y, piano-y bits. I mean, the Charlatans are always a good band for them. Similar to the Spiral Carpets in that way, where they had the organist there. Well, that be their organist, was it Rob Collins, who passed away? I don't know, I always thought he passed away before this album. So that might be his replacement, I don't know, I may have to look that up. I'll say it again, like I say it every time. Anything that I need to correct or clarify, or just anything that I find interesting that you may as well, I'll put it on screen. When I realised what this episode was, like I said, I've not watched it. I've very quickly scrubbed through just to check that the quality's alright. But when I realised what this episode was, and this was the Blur versus Oasis Top of the Pops, I was so excited to do this, and the day's finally come around. And, you know, so many teenage memories coming back. I mean, I was about to start my final year at secondary school at this point. I was 15 in August 1995. You were young, so at the time you don't tend to think about it as much, but I don't know, Britain just felt like on the cusp of like a turning point. I mean, you could say this turning point, if you're looking at it from a political point of view, didn't really come until just under 2 years later, when Labour got back into power after many years of Tory misrule. But I think the seeds have been sowed, certainly around this point. I mean, I do remember that famous scene right after the election in '97 where Tony Blair had this party and Noel Gallagher and Alan McGee were with him.
To Madonna's new video, that involves kind of perving around in a giant ice cube tray.
Hi, this is Diana Ross from Detroit, Michigan, at the Motown Sound exhibit for Top of the Pops.
Okay, there's Diana Ross, who
Tell you about this next group. Well, not a lot really, because they don't know
I mean, she would have been, what, like, well into her 50s at that point. She had a nice pair of pins, didn't she? I'm doing it again. I seem to be on these Top of the Pops episodes. Like, every time there's a female performer on who wears a short skirt or a short dress, then I get excited. Speaking of which, expansions, move your body. Now then, I would have said this was a hit earlier than this. This is confusing me, because I think this must be a re-release, a remix, surely. I could have sworn this was early 90s rather than mid-90s. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong, and I'll make a note. No, I'm sure this is a re-release. But yeah, Expansions Movie, but I like this. I like this when it came out, which I thought was some years, before this. It does sound like she's singing live, which I'm not sure that's the right choice, really. I mean, I'm pretty certain Oasis will be miming later on. Charlatans would have been miming. Clock would have been miming, certainly. Blur, they'll no doubt be miming. Oh, I'm not sure, actually. I'll have to wait and see. But for some reason, this female vocalist with Expansions is singing live, and I mean, she doesn't sound awful, but like, it's it's kind of like an anonymous dance track. Why don't you just mime to it? Because obviously the backing music, that's all pre-recorded. and the lyrics aren't exactly complex either. Yeah, this is a good track. Yep. Sort of housey, funky, very nice.
Okay, so never in the field of human conflict, blah, blah, blah. All I can say about all this Battle of the Bands business is, if there's any winners at all, it's you lot out there, because you're getting loads of good music to listen to. So, straight in at number 2, this is Oasis.
Here they are. Yep. So it was Country House versus Roll With It. And Blur won the battle, but you could say that ultimately Oasis won the war. Now, I remember this performance, because obviously Liam Gallagher, on the track as normal, he sings lead vocals. You can tell it's a Liam lead vocal instantly. But as you can see, Noel's taken lead vocals, but it's Liam's voice. So yeah, just to troll the Top of the Pops producers and probably the viewers as well, Noel and Liam decided to swap roles. So Noel's miming along to Liam's vocals here, which was their idea of a joke. And at the time, it was pretty witty by Oasis standards. I like Oasis. I'm not claiming that they're the world's most sophisticated band, but for pure fun, rock and roll, nothing wrong with them whatsoever. But where is Liam? Oh, well, there he is, look. So Liam's miming to Noel's guitar there. Oh, and Noel's got Liam's tambourine there. Look, just to add a bit more. So it makes me wonder if they had got to #1 with this, if they'd beaten Blur, whether they would have performed more sensibly. Probably not. They might have still done this, where they'd swapped. Gwigsy there and Bonehead both having a chuckle about probably the role reversal that's going on here. So yeah, both singles sold a ton of copies. I remember going into the record shops that week and seeing the displays of the CD singles and the cassette singles and the 7 and 12 inches in like Virgin Megastores and HMV and R Price. You know, and like, you know, buy Blur here, and then another display next to it, buy Oasis here. It was, you know, and I mentioned on the news and everything. It was big, you know. I've not known anything like that since, really. You know, something that got into the news, but it wasn't. You know, it was kind of frivolous. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. It is just pop music at the end of the day, but it was just something cultural that really resonated across the whole country. So much so that even mainstream media and the news media took note.
Right, now we've got someone who's just been giving me a few tips on where to go on the upcoming holiday in Iceland. A lot of people don't know how to pronounce her name. I do. Here on top of the pops, it's Bjork.
Bjork, or Bjork, or Björk. Isabel at number 23. That's her 7th top 40 hit, apparently. Yeah, I'm fairly familiar with this track. A few months ago, I bought a couple of Björk mini discs, and Isabel was on her album Post, her second solo album. And don't think this was one of my very favourite tracks on that album. It's a very good album, and the other album I bought was Homogenic, which she released in '97. Both of those have got an MD earlier this year. But Björk, although obviously nothing to do with the Britpop scene, being that she was from Iceland, not Britain, and her music was kind of, you know, sort of down-tempo with trip-hop elements and a lot of electro, different from a lot of what was in the charts at this point. You know, Charlatans, Pulp, Shed 7, Sleeper, Echo Belly, Gene. I could go on and on. Cast, of course, one of my favourite acts from this period. You could say this was the height of her career, really. You know, It's So Quiet. That would have been a hit before this, I think. There's quite a few singles that came off this album Post. This one, like I say, is not overly memorable to me, other than the fact it's not that long since I listened to it, because I did buy the album not long ago. But it's alright, it's pretty good. It's not what I'd call sort of catchy or overly memorable. You know, once I switch this off and do something else, I'm not going to have this go around my head later on. You know, like some songs do, they just become an earworm instantly, don't they? Isabel by Björk.
Alright, coming up now, we've got that exclusive I was telling you about earlier. This lady, she's been in show business a long time. She's influenced a lot of people. Michael Jackson's plastic surgeon. From the Motown
Jarvis with a dig at Jacko there.
Diana Ross.
Oh, satellite exclusive. Diana Ross performing. Did you say she was from Detroit or performing in Detroit earlier? But yeah, Diana Ross looking very good for her age. I know. I'm here to talk about the music. Yeah, well, with Diana Ross, what can you say? One of the most successful and most legendary female vocalists of all time. She was the prominent member of the Supremes in the 1960s. So much so that I think they started crediting the group as Diana Ross and the Supremes after a while, didn't they? 30 years later, here she is, still looking good, still sounding good. I mean, obviously she's miming, and this song, I mean, it's, you know, it's sort of, you know, kind of saturated American R&B. It's not a particularly brilliant song, but, you know, her voice is still holding up, as You know, there's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's just not to my taste. Nothing but respect for her career and the fan base that she would have had for, well, as I'm speaking now, getting on for 60 years. You know, wow. Oh, here we go. We've got some predictions here for Sunday's chart. Michael Jackson, Berry, don't remember that. The Rembrandts, that'll be the Friends theme. Echo Belly, Radiohead, and DeLacy. What Michael Jackson single will that be? That'll probably be You Are Not Alone, I think. Yeah, it will be, yeah. And did that get to number 1? Earth Song, later on in the year, got to number 1, because that stopped the Beatles' Free as a Bird getting to the Christmas number 1 in December 95. I like that Jarvis Cocker was sort of having a little bit of a dig at Michael Jackson there, and then obviously in early 1996 he did the infamous Brit Awards stage invasion during Michael Jackson's performance of Earth Song, which I believe I've talked about before on quite an old episode of my reaction series. Things come full circle. Wonderful. So yeah, this isn't a very good song, but it is what it is. The worst song on this episode so far, certainly.
Only in probably a far more mature and professional way than myself. She can act, she can sing, she can dance. She's Michelle Gale.
Okay, Michelle Gale. Right. Happy Just to Be With You. This is her 5th top 40 hit, apparently. Michelle Gale started out as an actress. I vividly remember her from Grange Hill when I was young. I think Michelle Gale's probably 3 or 4 years older than me, so, you know, she wasn't that old when she was on Grange Hill, and I was even, a few years younger. And she went to EastEnders. She stayed on EastEnders for a couple of years or so, I think, till 1990. I think end of 1995. End of 1993. Sorry, she left EastEnders, and then 1994 was when her pop career took off. But her big hit, I remember, was Sweetness, which was her first single, I think, in '94, and she may have had other top 10 hits, but that's the only one that I really remember. I don't remember this at all. I wouldn't have thought this gets much higher than what it is now. I don't know, I think kind of she'd peaked quite early, Michelle Gale. This isn't great either, really. This and Diana Ross is fine, you know, if you like kind of sort of overproduced pop music, but on an episode that is historic in British music, and it's quite a privilege for me to be able to relive these days 25 years ago here in 2020. You know, I think really they should have, even if it was like lower charted acts, or they had to, you know, do a different exclusive or something. You know, I think they should have put more of the Britpop bands, more of the guitar bands on, just to make it kind of like almost a Britpop special. But they have to represent what's in the charts, and I know the Diana Ross one was an exclusive, I think. This one is actually a chart entry. We've got a rap bit here from somebody. Sounds like a really weird echo to his voice. I'm assuming that's deliberate on the track. So that was Michelle Gale.
You're shaking, Michelle. I don't know about you lot, but I can feel a top 10.
Here we go. That historic top 10.
Corona would try me out. Look to, darling. Number 9, Kiss from a Rose, Seal. Number 8, it's Madonna with Human Nature. Number 7, it's Jax, you dirty son of a gun.
Oh, I like that,
Number
son of a gun.
6,
That was alright, that was pretty good.
Number 5, it's Waterfalls from BLT. Sorry, TLC. Number 4, Take That, Never Forget. Number 3, it's
I like that as well.
You, baby. And at number
Yeah.
2, it's
Well, we know what's number 1.
And that can mean only one thing. Although it's a taking part that's important, not the winning. We don't want a civil war, but tonight there's no denying Blur are top of the pops.
So there we are. Ah, and Alex James, Blur bassist, trolling Oasis there by wearing Oasis shirt. Obviously, Blur and Oasis at this point, they disliked each other, is the polite way of putting it. I think a lot of it was done for show. You know, it was like a professional rivalry that, you know, it seemed to get personal at times, but it was, you know, it all made good copy, as they say in the journalism industry. Country House, it sold more than Roll With It this week, or the previous week, as the initial chart would have come the previous Sunday. And then Top of the Pops comes out 4 days after. I like this, one of my favourite Blur singles. Have they done better? Yes, I would say they have. I think Blur have kind of disowned Country House a little bit, and maybe even some more around this era, this Great Escape era. That was the name of the album that Country House came from. Because they went a lot more sort of almost American college rock style after this. They really sort of distanced themselves from the sort of, yeah, we're British, yeah, you rule Britannia kind of thing with the next album, when they released stuff like Beetle Bum and Song 2, which sounded more like stuff you'd get from an American alternative act, and I think that was a very conscious move on Blur's part to not be seen as this cheeky, chappy Mockney band, because that was one of the criticisms with Blur as well at the time, that you know, they try to be all sort of Mockney, you know, all park life and everything, but they were a bit too middle class to truly pull it off. Whereas Oasis from Manchester, so they're not Mockneys, you know, they're, you know, northern. You know, they were a lot more, you could just tell how authentic they were. You know, they are kind of, you know, working class yobs, ultimately. It does sound like Damon Albarn is definitely singing live here, so, and he's pulled a couple of people up off stage. So yeah, live vocals from Damon. Pretty certain that the backing track will be pre-recorded, though, that the rest of the band are playing along to. Really fun episode this for me to react to. Some great music on it. A couple of slightly ropey bits from Diana Ross and Michelle Gale, but nothing that was outrageously offensive to my sensibilities. But Oasis, Roll With It, not my favourite Oasis song, but just a funny performance seeing Liam and Noel swap roles. Jarvis Cocker has been quite a witty host on this, I think. I kind of wish he'd done more TV hosting. I believe he does do a lot of radio presenting now, though, for Six Music, I think. And I'm a big Pulp fan anyway. Yeah. Lovely.
Enjoyed the show.
I did.
Lisa Hansen will be doing it to you. In the meantime, love thy neighbour, do as you would be done by, and stay alive, because I love you.
Right. So, we're being played out by Red Hot Chili Peppers, that is. Not sure what...
A chance to go exclusively behind the scenes of Take That's Nobody Else tour this Sunday on BBC 2 in the Ozone at 11:40. Next tonight on BBC 1, EastEnders.
Thank you. So, yeah. It's the credits. Red Hot Chili Peppers are playing you out. So, thank you everyone for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. Please join me again for my next reaction. Cheers, everyone. See ya!
Described as the British Heavyweight Pop Music Championship. In one corner, 4 young middle-class men from the south of England, collectively known as Blur, and in the other corner, 5 young working-class men from Manchester, called Oasis. They're the 2 most popular bands in Britain, having sold millions of records, and they're currently engaged in a chart war that set the music industry alight.